Hello. Welcome to the Tea Party Hardy channel. This is a review of part 1 of Grant from the History Channel, as you can see by the little logo right there. This is the most unique presentation I've ever seen on the History Channel. It is told in a way that is very similar to an actual movie. There's things that they leave out that would have made it just all the way to a 10 out of a 10 instead of a 9.5 out of 10 in regard to making it feel like you're watching a movie instead of a documentary with interspersed biopic segments. Okay, so I'll get into those later because that's just for fun. As far as the show goes, the interviews are, and it's terrible that we live in this era now where when you watch who's being interviewed, you have to be suspicious of their politics because of what's happened in the last 5 years in our production world of Hollywood, and that includes documentaries. You have to be suspicious. And there are a few people that are interviewed that have not a well-regarded history of recounting history. I'm not going to name names only because they keep them in check, which I was very happy about, because I know their bio, their CV, and so I was happy to see and relieved that they did keep them in check. They didn't let them stray and go into diatribes that have nothing to do with what was going on, or worse, lie about the past to make themselves or some other group look good. Enough said about that. So you learn in the first episode, which is an hour and a half, about a little bit about his early beginnings. Not much about his childhood. It's a lot like the Bible in that way. That's like, okay, he's born and then he's 12 and now he's serving in the military. It's like, boom. But it's done really well. The whole thing is done really well. It's a good watch. The actor that you see here, the one that plays Ulysses S. Grant, is disturbingly similar to looking just like Grant. And when they fade back and forth between the still photos of the real Grant and this fellow, is like, wow. And see, this is an example where if it would have been a real movie, they would have used morphing technology. They didn't. They don't use any tricks of special effects nature. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I would have kind of preferred the other way. Sometimes a little cheese is good. All right. What else do you need to know? The history is on target. I'm looking forward to seeing part 3. I don't know what's in it, but I'm hoping that it gets into his relationship, as in Friends, with Mark Twain, because the show does open up reading from his autobiography that he was coaxed into by Mark Twain. And I don't know where they will go with that. But Mark Twain had... oh, boy, did that work out weird. Mark Twain has, Samuel Clemens if you prefer, had Ulysses S. Grant write his biography. It became an enormous seller. Enormous. And Mark Twain owned the publishing company that did it. So then Mark Twain hired all these other famous people, Gandhi and some others, to write their biographies, autobiographies. And they all flopped. And so Mark Twain went bankrupt again. Because what Mark Twain didn't count on is the fact that Ulysses S. Grant was a freaking brilliant writer. As much as he was a brilliant tactician on the battlefield, so too was he with a pen. And spoiler alert, when Grant died, he'd finished his last page on his autobiography, and then he died. So again, it's kind of like the Bible, in this case with Moses. So I don't know how much of that's on purpose on their side, but there you go. All right, now let's get into the fluffy puffy stuff of how this compares to an actual movie, because it's really intriguing how they've introduced this new manner of storytelling. And then again, I'll tell you where they cut it short, where they held back the reins since he's on a horse. Okay, so they have the traditional interviews. A lot of them are more truncated than you're used to. The other thing that's unusual about this one compared to the olden days ones on History Channel when they would do things of the West is you don't have the the professors from the middle states. There's only a few that are from non-Ivy League schools, and that is a bummer. Because in the old days, when they would do stuff in the West, there was that, they only have like 7 of these people that do all of them. And one of them was the guy from New Mexico, University of New Mexico. And so, I don't know, I don't even know if he's still around, but he was always an interesting interview. So they don't do that. All right, so that's one thing they do. But they weave in from the characters of the interviewees, sorry, and then they'll go into the movie. Now, here's an opportunity that they didn't take. Because they transition from the story that they just told into showing it, if they would have used an actual fade out in the cinematic way, where you fade from one scene into the next, the almost dream sequence style, that would have been so cool. They don't do it. And again, there's no cheese. The only thing you can really ding this show on, because the directing is really good, the acting is really good, the lookalikes are, at least in Grant's case, stunning. The only area I could see that was worth dinging is the lighting. The lighting looks like a documentary and not a film. It's too bright to ever be confused with a film. Way too much light. Only in that regard of comparing it to an actual film. They have the largest, or at least they trick you into thinking, the largest on-set characters, not including the episodes of prior documentaries, where they just film those people that do that for the weekend. Okay, so you have these really wide-angle scenes, and there's a couple of... Oh, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. This is not for kids. The graphics of the gore is... It's there. It's right up there with Saving Private Ryan. And they warn you all through the show. They're not kidding. It's gross. It's gross. And when they do it, they do it a lot. And then they leave it behind. But there's several scenes where the warning is apropos. Okay, so the lighting is not cinematic. But everything else is. The cast is huge. Oh, and another thing that I really liked. They had the cast members wearing costumes that weren't perfectly clean. There's nothing more ridiculous than watching these period pieces and everybody's wearing a brand new outfit. I mean, everybody. Not in this one. There's dust on the shelves. It's really... They nailed it. It's wonderful. That's why I say it's so much like a real movie, except for they don't do the creamy fades into the scenes, which a real movie would. The other thing is, 6 minutes before episode 1 ends, there's a massive cliffhanger right before they go to the commercial. If they wanted to be full-on cheesy, like everybody else, episode would have ended right there. And I was expecting it to. And it's like, oh man, the credits are going to run 6 minutes? Ugh. No, they actually came back and finished episode 1. I'm like, oh, I mean, I was happy that I got the resolution, but I'm like, you're just so used to the freaking cliffhangers to push you into the next episode. So they don't do that, but they could have, and they know it because of where they did it. The editing is fantastic, minus the fact they didn't use the creamy fades. Okay, the editing is fantastic. The directing is fantastic. The lighting is not... The lighting is perfect for a documentary. It's awful for a cinema. You'll know what I mean when you watch it. The script is great. And the other thing so all those things, they've never done it this good in any of their prior productions. Sorry, there was one more thing I wanted to mention. I had it and then I lost it. Darn it. So, but it was something good because there's a lot of good to be said about this. And trying to grasp for it one more time, otherwise I'll just have to end it here and do it on episode 2. So about the gore. It's made like a movie, minus a few different characteristics. And do I recommend it? I'm going to go with yes. I highly recommend this show. Looking forward to seeing part 2. Not going to be able to get to it for a while, but I will, and I'll post it. So if you want to know what I think of part 2, you can dive in. Hopefully it'll be as praising as this. If it is, I won't go into it as thick because I've already covered everything here as far as the story goes and the techniques and the cinema techniques. The music, didn't notice it, so it must have been good enough to not be in the way, so that's a good thing. All right, I guess that's it, and we will see you in the future.